My Aunt Patricia had spent the better part of an hour at my parents' house bragging about hiring expensive tutors for her children. Premium services, she kept saying. The kind of educational support that actually makes a difference. When I mentioned my 10-year-old daughter Emma was struggling with math, Patricia set down her wine glass and looked at me with that particular expression I'd seen my whole life. Half pity, half satisfaction. "Oh, honey," she said, loud enough that my mother and sister both turned to look. "You can't afford real education on your salary. These tutors charge $300 an hour. Maybe look into some YouTube videos." I didn't respond. I picked up my phone, typed something, and set it back down. My mother changed the subject. Patricia went back to describing how her son's tutor had connections at Princeton. 2 months later, the same tutoring company sent my aunt an invoice as a referral courtesy showing my daughter's account. The balance showed $12,000 paid in full for a 6-month intensive program. Premium tier. The same tutors Patricia's children used. I was standing in my parents' kitchen when Patricia called my mother, her voice coming through the speakerphone high and tight. My aunt went pale, my mother told me later. Completely white. Had to sit down. Let me tell you how we got here. I was 37 years old, and I'd been working in educational technology for 9 years. Started as a curriculum designer at Pearson, making $47,000 a year. The kind of salary that made Patricia laugh at family gatherings. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, pulled in $130,000 annually, and never let anyone forget it. Growing up, I was the quiet one. Patricia was my mother's sister, only 4 years older than me, and she'd always positioned herself as the successful one in the extended family. She married a cardiologist when she was 26. Had 2 kids by 30. Lived in a house in Westchester that she mentioned cost $890,000 every time someone visited. I remembered specific moments. Christmas 2019, when I mentioned I was thinking about grad school. Patricia had laughed, actually laughed, and said, "On what money? Do you know what an MBA costs?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Try $80,000 at a decent school. But I'm sure there are community college options." My mother had looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Easter 2021. I'd just gotten engaged to David, who worked as a project manager at a construction firm. Patricia cornered me by the dessert table. "Is he going to be able to support you? I mean, construction project management, that's what, 60,000? 70. She'd sipped her champagne. "You might want to keep working." I'd smiled and said, "We'll be fine." She'd patted my arm. "Well, at least you're realistic about your limitations." 4th of July 2022. My daughter Emma was 7, struggling with reading comprehension. I mentioned it to my mother, wondering if she had any suggestions. Patricia overheard from the kitchen. "You know what helps? Professional intervention. We use a reading specialist who trained at Columbia. $500 a session, but Emma's reading at a 9th grade level now." She meant her daughter Emma, named after our grandmother, just like my Emma. Of course, it's an investment. You have to be in a position to make those investments. By then, I'd been promoted twice at Pearson. I was making $72,000. I'd also been consulting on the side, building relationships with private tutoring companies, understanding their business models, learning how they operated, who their clients were, what they charged. Patricia didn't know that in March 2023, I'd left Pearson. Took a position as Senior Director of Curriculum Development at Summit Learning Solutions, a boutique educational consulting firm in Manhattan. Starting salary, $115,000. Equity options included. I didn't announce it at family dinners. When people asked about work, I said, "Same stuff, different day." My mother asked once if I was still at Pearson. "Moved to something new," I'd said. Similar work. Patricia had been scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. I didn't know that same week, Patricia had convinced my parents to update their will, suggesting that since I wasn't as financially stable, maybe the inheritance should be weighted toward her and our younger brother Michael. My father mentioned it to David months later, embarrassed. "Your mother-in-law thought it was fair," he'd said quietly. "Given the differences in income." By June 2023, Summit Learning Solutions had been acquired by a larger educational technology company for $4.2 million. My equity options suddenly mattered. The payout came to $243,000 after taxes. I'd worked there 4 months. I put it in an investment account. Told no one. When my mother asked how work was going, I said, busy. You know how it is. Patricia stopped by my parents' house that same month, showed everyone the photos from her family's vacation to the Amalfi Coast. 12 days, private villa, cost them $32,000. You have to treat yourself, she'd said, looking at me. When you can afford to. I'd been reviewing contracts for my new consulting business at the time. Silent partner in an educational content development company. We just signed a deal with McGraw-Hill worth $600,000 over 2 years. Sounds amazing, I'd said to Patricia. The photos are beautiful. She'd smiled, satisfied. September 2023. Emma had started 4th grade. The school called, concerned about her math scores. She was behind grade level, struggling with multiplication and division. Needed intervention. I scheduled a meeting with her teacher, asked for recommendations. The teacher suggested either school-based tutoring, which was free but limited, or private tutoring if we could afford it. She mentioned several companies. One of them was Apex Academic Solutions, the same company Patricia used for her kids. Premium tier service, she said. Expensive, but effective. The kind of tutoring that came with diagnostic assessments, personalized learning plans, progress tracking, and tutors with master's degrees minimum. I recognized the name immediately. Apex Academic Solutions. I'd done consulting work for them the previous year, helping restructure their curriculum framework for high-achieving students. I still had contacts there, including the director of client services, a woman named Jennifer Martinez, who I'd worked with extensively. I called Jennifer that afternoon. I need to ask about your tutoring services, I'd said. For my daughter. We'd talked for 40 minutes. She explained the pricing, $300 per hour, minimum 20-hour commitment for the intensive program. 5 weeks of diagnostic work, then a customized 6-month plan. Total cost for what Emma needed, around $12,000. That's the same program you use for all your premium clients? I'd asked. Yes. Same tutors, same framework. We don't have a cheaper tier. This is what works. I'd been quiet for a moment. Then, what if I paid up front? Full amount. Jennifer had paused. For the 6-month intensive program? That would be, we could do $12,000 even. You'd get priority scheduling. Done, I'd said. I'll transfer the payment today. You don't want to wait? Meet the tutor first? See. No. I trust your system. I helped build parts of it. She'd laughed. Fair enough. Let me set everything up. I'd transferred $12,000 that evening. My investment account barely noticed. Emma started tutoring the following week. At my parents' house the next Sunday, Patricia had been talking about her son's tutor again. SAT prep specialist, previously worked at Kaplan, now private practice. He only takes students with serious potential, she'd said. Very selective. I'd been helping my mother with dishes. Emma started some extra help with math, I'd said casually. Patricia had walked into the kitchen. Oh? Like Khan Academy. Something like that. Well, that's good. Free is good for your budget. She'd checked her phone. We're spending a fortune on tutoring, but it's worth it. You can't put a price on education. My mother had glanced at me. I just smiled, kept washing dishes. Patricia had no idea Emma's tutor was the same woman who worked with her daughter on reading comprehension. A woman with a PhD in educational psychology from Stanford. Patricia paid $325 an hour because she booked sessions individually. I'd paid $12,000 upfront for a better rate and priority scheduling. The tutor, Dr. Sarah Chin, mentioned it to Jennifer Martinez after the 3rd session with Emma. This is Patricia's niece? Dr. Chen had asked. The same family? Jennifer had confirmed it. They'd both found it interesting but kept it professional. Client confidentiality mattered. By November 2023, Emma's math scores had improved significantly. She'd moved from below grade level to working on advanced problems. Dr. Chen sent progress reports every 2 weeks. The improvement was documented, measurable, dramatic. I didn't mention it at Thanksgiving. Patricia spent most of dinner talking about her daughter's acceptance into a gifted program at school. The tutoring made all the difference, she'd said. But you have to be willing to invest. Really invest. My mother had asked me how Emma was doing in school. Better, I'd said. She's working hard. Patricia had raised her wine glass. Public school can only do so much. That's why private intervention matters. I'd nodded. Ate my turkey. Said nothing about the $12,000 or Dr. Chen or the progress reports showing Emma was now testing at a 6th grade math level. I didn't know that Patricia had been telling people at her firm about her struggling niece. How I was doing my best, but couldn't afford the kind of help my daughter really needed. How sad it was that financial limitations prevented access to quality education. She'd mentioned it to my mother in late December, framed as concern. My mother had defended me. She's doing fine. Emma's doing better in school. Patricia had made a sympathetic sound. Well, better is relative. I just hope she can get Emma into a decent college someday. By January 2024, my consulting business was generating $32,000 monthly. The McGraw-Hill contract had expanded. We'd picked up 2 additional clients, both major educational publishers. I'd hired 3 part-time consultants. Filed for an LLC in October. Everything registered, documented, official. I was making more than Patricia. Significantly more. She had no idea. When she'd asked about my work in January, I'd said, consulting. Educational stuff. Oh, consulting, she'd said, in a tone that suggested consulting was something people did between real jobs. That's nice. Keeps you busy? Busy enough. February 2024. My parents' 45th wedding anniversary party. Patricia had arrived in a new BMW X5. Leased, she'd explained, but the lease payments were $870 monthly. You have to drive something decent, she'd said. Reflects on your professional image. I'd pulled up in my 2019 Honda CR-V, paid off. Reliable. Patricia had looked at it and smiled in that way that meant she was filing away another piece of evidence about my financial situation. Inside, she'd asked if I was still doing the consulting work. Must be nice to have flexible hours, she'd said. Even if the pay isn't great. It works for us. Well, that's what matters. Being content with what you have. She'd squeezed my shoulder. Not everyone needs to be wealthy. I'd excused myself, went to the bathroom, checked my business banking app. The account showed $187,000. I'd paid myself a salary of $12,000 monthly, kept the rest as operating capital for growth. I'd come back out, rejoin the party, listen to Patricia explain her plans to remodel their kitchen. $60,000 budget. We're not doing it halfway, she'd said. Quality costs money. March came. Emma's tutoring program was entering month 6. Dr. Chen's final report showed Emma testing at a 7th grade math level. Reading comprehension had improved too, though we hadn't been working on that specifically. Confidence, Dr. Chen had written, was transformative. When students believed they could succeed, they engaged differently with all subjects. The report had cost $12,000. Worth every dollar. I'd been planning to keep quiet about it. Just let Emma's success speak for itself eventually. But then Patricia had scheduled what she called a family investment discussion at my parents' house for late March. She'd send a group text. Important family financial planning. Everyone should attend. 2 p.m. Sunday. I'd asked David what he thought it was about. Probably about your parents' estate, he'd said. Your dad mentioned they were updating things. That's when I realized what was happening. Patricia was going to formalize the inheritance restructuring. Make it official. Present it as responsible planning. I'd called Jennifer Martinez at Apex Academic Solutions. I need to ask you something, I'd said. About client billing. Sure, what's up? When you bill clients, do you ever send courtesy invoices? Like, to show payment history? She'd paused. We can. If a client requests it. Or if there's a referral situation where someone wants to show their network what services look like. Why? Could you send my Aunt Patricia a courtesy invoice? Showing my daughter's account? Payment history? Program details. Jennifer had been quiet for 3 seconds. Your Aunt Patricia? The one whose kids use Dr. Chin. Yes. And you want me to send her documentation showing you paid $12,000 up front for the same program she's paying for session by session? Exactly. Another pause. When do you want me to send it? Tomorrow morning. Before 10 a.m. Done. The next day was Friday, March 22nd, 2024. Jennifer sent the invoice at 9:47 a.m. A professional, detailed document showing Emma's enrollment in the Apex Academic Solutions Premium Intensive Program. Services rendered, 6 months, 40 sessions, Dr. Sarah Chin assigned tutor. Payment status, paid in full, December 2023, amount $12,000. Referral courtesy notice for Patricia Morrison. Patricia called my mother at 10:15 a.m. My mother called me at 10:32 a.m. Did you? My mother had started. Patricia just received something. From a tutoring company. Oh, that, I'd said. Yes. Emma's been getting tutoring. Since December. The invoice shows $12,000. That's right. Silence. Then, how did you afford $12,000 for tutoring? I paid for it. But Patricia said you couldn't. She said your salary wouldn't. Patricia doesn't know what my salary is. More silence. I'd heard my mother take a breath. The family meeting on Sunday. You should come. I was planning on it. Patricia is going to want to talk to you. I'm sure she will. I'd hung up. Waited. Patricia texted me at 11:03 a.m. We need to talk about this invoice. I'd responded. What about it? Where did you get $12,000? From my bank account. This isn't funny. How can you afford this? I work. I save. I spend money on my daughter's education. She'd called. I'd let it go to voicemail. She'd called again. Same thing. By noon she'd called 6 times. David had come home from work early. Your aunt has called me twice, he'd said. She wants to know about our finances. What did you tell her? That she should talk to you. He'd looked at his phone. She's really upset. Good. Sunday, March 24th, 2024. 2 o'clock. I'd arrived at my parents' house exactly on time. Patricia's BMW was already there. So was my brother Michael's truck. Inside, Patricia was sitting at the dining room table with a leather folder in front of her. My parents were on the couch. Michael was standing by the window. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Patricia stood when I walked in. Her face was composed but tight. We need to discuss this invoice situation. I'd set my bag down. What situation? You know exactly what situation. How did you pay for $12,000 in tutoring? I transferred the money from my investment account. What investment account? You don't have investment accounts. I do, actually. Had it since June 2023. Patricia's expression shifted. Confusion starting to replace anger. Since June? What investment account? The one I opened after Summit Learning Solutions was acquired. My mother had stood up. Acquired. The company I worked for. Educational technology firm. They were bought out. I had equity options. The payout was $243,000 after taxes. Nobody spoke. The room was completely silent. Patricia's mouth had opened. Closed. Opened again. You got $240,000? Last June. Yes. And you didn't tell anyone? No. My brother had turned from the window. Jesus Christ. Patricia had sat back down. Hard. The chair made a scraping sound. You've been sitting on $250,000 for 9 months and pretending you couldn't afford things? I never pretended I couldn't afford things. You assumed I couldn't afford things. She'd started. Stopped. Her face had gone pale. Actually pale. The color draining from her cheeks in real time. The comments I made. About tutoring. About education. You told me I couldn't afford real education on my salary. You suggested YouTube videos. My mother had made a small sound. Patricia had put her hand on the table. I'd watched her fingers spread out flat, like she was steadying herself. But I was trying to help, Patricia had said, her voice different now. Smaller. I thought you were struggling. You thought wrong. Michael had walked over to the table. So what's this family meeting about, Patricia? You wanted to discuss something. Patricia had looked at the leather folder. Didn't open it. Estate planning, she'd said quietly. I was going to suggest. I talked to Mom and Dad about updating their will, given the financial differences between us. What differences? I'd asked. She'd looked at me then. Really looked at me. I make $130,000 a year. You were at Pearson making what, 70? I thought. I don't work at Pearson anymore. Haven't since March 2023. Where do you work? I run a consulting business. Educational content development. We have contracts with McGraw-Hill, Pearson actually, and 2 other major publishers. Patricia had swallowed. I'd watched her throat move. What does that pay? Last month? $32,000. That's monthly revenue. I pay myself $12,000 in salary. The rest goes back into the business. My father had done the math out loud. That's $144,000 a year. In salary. Plus business income. Yes. Patricia had put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes had widened. I'd watched her try to process it, the numbers not matching her assumptions, the entire foundation of how she'd positioned herself in the family suddenly unstable. And the tutoring, my mother had said. Emma's been working with the same company as Patricia's kids? Same company. Same tutor for some sessions, actually. Dr. Sarah Chin. She's excellent. Patricia had made a sound. Not quite a word. Dr. Chin is, she knows Emma is your daughter? Of course. She sends me progress reports every 2 weeks. Emma's testing at a 7th grade math level now. Up from 3rd grade level in November. My brother had started laughing. Actual laughing. This is incredible. Patricia, you've been doing financial planning based on numbers that were wrong by about $200,000. Patricia had stood up suddenly. Sat back down. She'd started. Didn't finish. Her hands were shaking. Actually shaking. I'd watched her try to pick up her water glass and have to set it back down because she couldn't hold it steady. My mother had walked to the table. Patricia, what exactly were you going to propose today? Patricia had looked at the leather folder. I'd suggested that given income disparities, maybe the inheritance should be distributed differently. More to Michael and me. A smaller amount too. She'd gestured at me without looking at me. How much smaller? My father had asked, his voice hard. I thought maybe 20% to her. 40% each to Michael and me. Michael had stopped laughing. You were going to cut her down to 20%? I thought she needed it less. That she couldn't manage a larger amount. That we were in better positions to. She makes more than you do, Michael had said. She makes more than all of us. Patricia had put her head in her hands. For 4 full seconds, no one said anything. I'd heard someone's phone buzz in another room. The refrigerator had hummed. The tutoring company, Patricia had said finally, her voice muffled by her hands. They sent the invoice as a referral courtesy. Because they thought. She'd looked up at me. You told them to send it. I asked them to, yes. You wanted me to know. I wanted you to have accurate information before today's meeting. Because you knew. You knew I was going to suggest the inheritance change. Dad mentioned it to David. Months ago. Patricia had stood up again. This time she'd walked to the window. Stood there with her back to us. I'd watched her shoulders rise and fall. When she'd turned around, her face was blotchy. Red and white in patches. I've spent months, she'd said. Months telling people you were struggling. That I felt bad for you. That you couldn't give Emma the advantages my kids had. I know. You let me. You didn't ask. You assumed. My mother had sat down heavily. Patricia, honey, why would you assume? Why wouldn't you just ask her about work? About finances? Because she was at Pearson. Making $70,000. She drove a Honda. She never talked about money. I drove a Honda because it's paid off and reliable, I'd said. I didn't talk about money because money isn't my personality. You made it yours. Patricia had looked at me with something like desperation. Everyone at work. I told everyone at work about my struggling sister-in-law. How education inequality affected even family members. How? She'd stopped. Put her hand over her mouth again. How what? Michael had asked. How I was helping her daughter. Setting up college fund contributions because her mother couldn't afford to. The room had gone very quiet again. You set up a college fund for Emma? My mother had asked. $500. Last month. I was going to tell you today. Show that even though money was being redistributed in the will, I still cared about supporting. She'd stopped. Oh God. I'd pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, showed the screen to my mother. Emma's 529 plan. Started in January 2024. Current balance, $35,000. My mother had taken the phone, looked at it, passed it to my father. He'd stared at the screen for a long time. $35,000, he'd said quietly. I contribute $2,000 monthly. Started with a $15,000 initial deposit. Patricia had slid down the wall. Actually slid down until she was sitting on the floor with her knees up. I thought I was helping. I thought I was the successful one who could afford to be generous. You were being condescending, Michael had said. Not generous. My father had closed the leather folder without opening it. I think we're done with estate planning discussions today. Actually, I'd said. Can we talk about it? The current will splits everything 3 ways, right? My mother had nodded. Keep it that way. Even split. I don't need more. I don't want Patricia to have less. Just leave it alone. Patricia had looked up at me from the floor. Why? Because it's not about the money. It was never about the money. Then what was it about? Respect. You made assumptions about my life, my choices, my daughter's future. You never asked. You just decided you knew better. Patricia had pushed herself back up to standing. Her mascara was smudged. I'd never seen her mascara smudged before. The BMW, she'd said suddenly. I lease it because the payment fits our budget better than buying the kitchen remodel. We're financing it because we don't have $60,000 in cash. The Amalfi Coast trip. Credit card. We're still paying it off. Nobody had said anything. I make good money, she'd continued. But we spend everything. We have maybe $15,000 in savings. And you. She gestured at me. You have $250,000 in investments and you drive a paid-off Honda. Different priorities. No. Better priorities. Smarter priorities. She'd walked back to the table. Picked up the leather folder. I'm going to go. Patricia, my mother had started. No, I need to go. I need to. She'd looked at me. I'm sorry. For all of it. The comments. The assumptions. The college fund like I was doing you some favor when you'd already saved 7 times what I contributed. 70 times, I'd corrected quietly. You contributed 500. I'd put in 35,000. She'd winced. Right. 70 times. Jesus. She'd picked up her purse. The will thing. I'm sorry. I genuinely thought I was helping plan for someone who couldn't manage a large inheritance. I see now how insulting that was. My father had stood up. We'll have dinner later this week. When everyone's calmer. Patricia had nodded. Walked to the door. Stopped. The invoice. From Apex. It said referral courtesy. Do I actually get a referral credit? Jennifer Martinez had mentioned that. Standard practice. If someone refers a client who completes a program, the referrer gets 10% of the total paid as account credit. Yes, I'd said. $1,200 toward your kids' tutoring. Patricia had opened her mouth. Closed it. You paid $12,000 for Emma's tutoring, and I get a referral bonus that makes my kids' tutoring cheaper? That's how their referral program works. That's... She'd started laughing. Not happy laughing. The kind of laughing people do when they don't know what else to do. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. She'd opened the door. I really am sorry. For what it's worth. She'd left. We'd heard the BMW start up. Pull away. Michael had sat down at the table. That was the most awkward thing I've ever witnessed. She meant well, my mother had said, but she'd sounded uncertain. She meant to be superior, Michael had corrected. There's a difference. My father had put his arm around my mother. We should have asked you about work. About how things were going. We just assumed Pearson was still. It's fine. I don't need to announce every job change. No, but Patricia poisoned the well. Got us thinking you were struggling when you weren't. We should have known better. I'd stayed for another hour. We'd talked about the business, about Emma's progress, about David's promotion to senior project manager that had come with a $20,000 raise. Things Patricia didn't know because she'd never asked. When I'd left, my mother had hugged me at the door. The tutoring, she'd said. You did that because Emma needed it, not to prove a point to Patricia. Of course. But you told the company to send the invoice. That was to prove a point. She'd smiled. Good. For 3 weeks, everything was quiet. Patricia didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't come to Sunday dinners. Then my mother mentioned Patricia had called her, crying, because people at work had found out about the situation. Someone Patricia had told about her struggling sister-in-law had asked how the struggling sister-in-law's daughter was doing with tutoring. Patricia had to explain. The story spread. Her managing director, who Patricia had told about making college fund contributions to help family, asked pointed questions about Patricia's judgment. Patricia's reputation as the financially successful, generous family member who helped struggling relatives collapsed in about 48 hours. She'd also had to return a leadership award her company had given her for charitable giving. Turned out the college fund contribution for Emma was part of what qualified her for it. When the truth came out, that I didn't need help, that Patricia had made assumptions, the optics were bad enough that they rescinded it. Michael told me Patricia stopped talking about money entirely at family events. Stopped offering financial advice. Stopped mentioning what things cost. I saw her at Easter. She'd been polite, quiet, asked Emma how school was going. Emma had told her about making the advanced math track. Patricia had congratulated her, excused herself, spent 20 minutes in the bathroom. My business hit $48,000 in monthly revenue by May. Hired 2 full-time consultants. Expanded into curriculum development for online learning platforms. Started working with 3 universities on their distance learning programs. Patricia's BMW lease ended. She'd bought a used Honda Accord. My mother mentioned it carefully, like she wasn't sure if I'd find it funny or sad. Emma finished 4th grade testing at an 8th grade level in math. Dr. Chen had called it one of the most dramatic improvements she'd seen in 20 years of tutoring. The 529 plan hit $49,000. On track to have over $300,000 by the time Emma started college. For 6 months, everything was stable. Patricia was different. Quieter. More careful. Family dinners were less tense because she wasn't performing success anymore. Then yesterday, my lawyer called. Patricia's filed a complaint, she'd said. With the tutoring company. Claims you manipulated the referral program to embarrass her. She wants the referral bonus canceled, and she's demanding Apex terminate your daughter's account for ethical violations. I'd hung up. Opened my safe. Pulled out the folder I'd been keeping since March. Inside were printed copies of every text message Patricia had sent me over the past 5 years. Every email. Every conversation my mother had reported where Patricia had called me financially irresponsible, unable to provide for Emma, limited by my salary. There were also recordings. I'd started recording family dinners in February after my father had mentioned the wool situation. My phone, set on the table, running a voice memo app. Completely legal in New York where I lived, as a one-party consent state. I had Patricia on recording saying I couldn't afford real education. Saying my salary was insufficient. Suggesting Emma would never get into a decent college without help from family. I had documentation of every assumption, every dismissive comment, every piece of advice offered from a position of superiority that turned out to be based on completely false information. And I had the original invoice from Apex Academic Solutions with Jennifer Martinez's note attached, sent as requested to demonstrate client confidence in our program. Referral bonus standard practice per company policy section 4.7. I'd been waiting for this. So, what do you think? Did Patricia go too far trying to control the narrative about family finances, or was I wrong to let her make assumptions for so long? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and the price of assumptions.